The Stallone-Schwarzenegger story, rivalry, redemption, and respect. Long before either man became a household name, Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger shared something surprisingly similar: humble origins and enormous dreams. Stallone grew up in a modest household, a painfully shy kid who went by the nickname Binky and spent his childhood lost in superhero fantasies. He once reportedly tried to leap off a building, convinced he could fly like the heroes he idolized. Schwarzenegger, meanwhile, grew up in a small, working-class Austrian village where luxury was non-existent and ambition was the only currency that mattered. Both boys had their eyes fixed on something far beyond their circumstances. What's remarkable is that both future rivals drew inspiration from the same source: the mythological hero Hercules, as portrayed on screen by legendary bodybuilder Steve Reeves. Stallone saw Reeves on screen and felt something shift inside him. That performance sparked a lifelong obsession with physical transformation and masculine strength. Schwarzenegger plastered his bedroom walls with posters of Reeves and another bodybuilding icon who had also played Hercules. He studied that man's career so carefully that he eventually befriended him and turned his childhood idol into a personal mentor. Two boys, separated by an ocean, were quietly being shaped by the same dream. Given those parallel journeys, one might expect the two men to have become natural allies when their paths finally crossed in Hollywood. Instead, what emerged was one of the most fiercely competitive rivalries the entertainment industry had ever seen. Their first truly defining encounter came at the 34th Golden Globe Awards in 1977. Stallone arrived riding the enormous wave of success generated by Rocky, a film that had turned him into one of the most talked-about names in the industry almost overnight. Schwarzenegger was also nominated that evening, representing his transition from bodybuilding champion to legitimate actor. The stakes were high for both men, and the tension between them was immediate. When Schwarzenegger took home the award for New Star of the Year, the atmosphere between them became charged. Stallone felt the sting of the moment deeply. But when Rocky later secured its own victory of the evening, Stallone made a dramatic and theatrical gesture, hurling a floral arrangement toward Schwarzenegger in a moment that felt less like celebration and more like a declaration of war. An iconic rivalry had been formally born. Through the early 1980s, the competition grew into something that defined an entire decade of cinema. Stallone introduced the world to John Rambo in 1982, a damaged Vietnam veteran whose emotional complexity resonated with audiences far beyond what anyone had anticipated. That same year, Schwarzenegger unleashed Conan the Barbarian onto the world. The two men were now locked in a battle for the soul of the action genre, and neither was willing to concede an inch. Production decisions were reportedly made specifically to outdo the other, adjusting body counts, increasing spectacle, escalating every element of cinematic firepower until their films became cultural events rather than simple entertainment. The rivalry spilled beyond movie screens and into interviews, business decisions, and personal conflicts. Schwarzenegger gave a British tabloid an interview suggesting Stallone leaned heavily on stunt doubles, a claim that reportedly infuriated Stallone and added fuel to an already raging fire. Stories circulated of Stallone demanding that a nightclub remove a photograph of Schwarzenegger from its wall, refusing to be in the same room as a visual reminder of his competitor. The animosity had evolved from professional envy into something far more personal and consuming. Things reached a genuinely dark moment when a British publication ran a damaging story connecting Schwarzenegger's family history to Nazi-era war crimes. The story caused enormous public controversy, and Schwarzenegger was furious. When legal proceedings unfolded, a troubling detail emerged. One of the story's key sources was allegedly Stallone himself, who was also reported to have contributed financially to the journalist's legal defense. Whether driven by rivalry, resentment, or something else entirely, the revelation exposed just how deeply the competition had infected their judgment. Yet even amid such hostility, the two men found themselves bound together in unexpected ways. Danish actress and model Brigitte Nielsen became a strange thread connecting both their lives. She had a brief but intense involvement with Schwarzenegger before her relationship with Stallone ignited and quickly escalated. Stallone married her in 1985 after a whirlwind courtship measured in weeks rather than months. The marriage was dramatic, turbulent, and brief, collapsing within less than 2 years under the weight of rushed decisions and incompatible lives. Nielsen would later reflect that neither of them had truly understood what they were walking into. Stallone's professional life was also navigating turbulence during this period. After delivering some of the most commercially dominant films of the decade, the early 1990s brought a series of setbacks. Rocky V disappointed fans deeply. A miscalculation involving a poorly received action comedy became something of an industry legend. Reportedly, Stallone pursued the project after hearing Schwarzenegger might be interested, only to later suspect his rival had deliberately stoked that rumor to lure him into a weak script. The film bombed badly, and Stallone would eventually describe it as one of the most regrettable decisions of his career. Through the 1990s, both men experienced a gradual fading of their peak commercial dominance. Rather than intensifying the rivalry, that shared decline seemed to soften something between them. They had both been at the absolute summit and both felt the industry shifting beneath them. Around this same time, they joined forces, alongside Bruce Willis, as part owners of the Planet Hollywood restaurant chain. The business brought them into regular contact, forced cooperation where once there had only been combat, and helped transform the nature of their relationship. The chain ultimately struggled financially and collapsed into bankruptcy by the decade's end, but it had accomplished something unexpected. It had started converting enemies into something resembling allies. For years, filmmakers and fans had fantasized about seeing the two men share a screen. Multiple projects were discussed and fell apart. By 2009, the idea finally gained traction when Schwarzenegger agreed to appear in Stallone's ensemble action film featuring an all-star cast of action veterans. The collaboration symbolized a genuine turning point. When the two finally appeared together in leading roles in a 2013 thriller, it represented the conclusion of a decades-long journey from bitter rivals to working partners. Today, the transformation is complete. The two men appear together regularly on social media, share holidays, trade good-natured insults in the way that old friends do, and actively support each other's charitable work. Stallone has spoken warmly about how the rivalry, despite all its ugliness and excess, ultimately made both of them better. The constant pressure to outperform each other pushed both men to reach levels they might never have achieved otherwise. Stallone has also reflected more broadly on what his decades in the industry have taught him. Despite the franchise success, the iconic characters, the box office records, and the cultural footprint, he has pointed consistently to personal relationships as the thing that ultimately matters most. A brief and painful separation from his long-term wife Jennifer Flavin in 2022, followed quickly by a reconciliation, seemed to crystallize something for him. He has spoken about that period as a moment of genuine reckoning, one that forced him to examine what he had prioritized throughout his career and what he had perhaps neglected. Two men from humble beginnings, shaped by the same childhood heroes, forged into rivals by ambition and ego, and ultimately brought together by time, shared experience, and the humbling reality that no professional legacy outlasts the people who matter most. That is the story of Stallone and Schwarzenegger, and it is far richer than any film either of them ever made.